The crystal chandeliers of the Montclair Estate cast pools of golden light across the marbly floor, illuminating silk gowns and diamond cufflinks worth more than most men earn in a lifetime. It was my 50th birthday, and I stood at the center of it all. Vincent Caruso, a man who had clawed his way from the gutter to the penthouse, who had built an empire on blood and loyalty and the bones of those who had underestimated him. The cream of New York society swirled around me, politicians and crime lords, actors and investors, all of them smiling, all of them pretending they weren't terrified of the man who had just made the deal that would consolidate the East Coast underworld under one banner. My banner. Celeste clung to my arm like a prize I had won, her smile a perfect porcelain mask that never quite reached her eyes. She was beautiful, model-thin with cheekbones that could cut glass, and a wardrobe that cost more than my first Wari house. 2 years she had been on my arm, and I had given her everything: diamonds, real estate, access to circles her senator father had only dreamed of. Her fingers were cold against my sleeve, and I should have noticed the tension in her grip, the way her gaze kept drifting to the balcony doors. My second-in-command, Marco, was stationed near the bar, his hand resting too casually on his cuff, where I knew he kept a custom-holstered pistol. He had been with me for 12 years, had taken bullets for me, had sworn on his mother's grave that he would die before he betrayed me. I believed him. That was my first mistake. The orchestra played a sweeping waltz, the champagne flowed in crystalline rivers, and my lieutenants mingled with their counterparts from the other families. The Moretti delegation was there, led by my godfather Victor, whose failing health had left him gaunt and pale but whose eyes still held the sharp cunning that had made him a legend. He caught my gaze across the room and raised his glass, a silent acknowledgement of the alliance we had forged. I raised mine back, a son honoring his father, never suspecting that he had already sold me out to the very law he pretended to despise. The evening moved like honey, slow and golden, and deceptively sweet. The cake was wheeled out, a towering confection of fondant and suga, our flowers that must have taken a team of bakers a week to assemble. The crowd gathered, singing off-key, and I felt Celeste's grip tighten painfully on my arm. I glanced at her, about to ask if she was feeling unwell, when a small weight tugged at the hem of my jacket. I looked down. There was a child there, a little girl no more than 3 years old, with tight d'arc curls and enormous brown eyes that seemed too ancient for such a young face. She wore a simple cotton dress, faded and without frills, the kind of dress that marked her as a servant's child, as someone invisible to the glittering crowd. Her skin was brown, and her hand was tiny and sticky where it grasped my cuff. She was trembling, her lower lip caught between her teeth, but she did not cry. Behind her, a young maid in a sta-arched white uniform stood frozen with terror, her hand outstretched as if to snatch the girl back, but she was too late, too slow, too afraid of what might happen to her and her child in a room full of powerful men. The little girl raised one finger to her lips. "Sure," she whispered, and the sound was so soft, so intimate, that I had to lean down to hear it. Boom. The music swelled. Marco was walking toward me, a smile plastered across his face, his stride too purposeful. The crowd was clapping and laughing, an eye of the small drama unfolding at the edge of the stage. I knelt, bringing my face level with the child's, and my heart, a heart that had been forged in fire and fury, clenched with an emotion I could not name. "What did you say, little one?" I asked, my voice low and gentle in a way Rely allowed it to be. She pointed toward the balcony with a chubby, unsteady finger. "Bad men," she said, her voice rely a breath. Big boom. "Mommy, SCA red." I looked at the maid, her face now milk-white, her hands shaking so violently that she had to clutch her apron to still them.
She was not looking at me.
She was looking at the balcony, at the shadows shifting behind the velvet curtains, and in her eyes I saw the raw, primal terror of a woman who knows she is about to die. "Vincent," Marco called out, close now, too close. "The cake, boss. Let me escort you up there. Tradition, right first slice. 50 years young. I looked at Marco. I looked at his smile, at the sweat beading on his forehead, at the way his left hand hovered near his pocket. I looked at Celeste, who had stepped back from me, whose face was now a mask of cold anticipation. I looked at the child, still holding my cuff, her eyes still fixed on mine. Get down. I said. Marco blinked. What? Get down? The first explosion ripped through the ballroom. A deafening roar that shattered the chandeliers and sent a rain of crystal shards cascading down like deadly diamonds. I dove, grabbing the maid and her child, throwing my body over theirs as fire and smoke erupted around us. The marble floor bucked beneath me, and the screams began, a chorus of terror that rose above the chaos like the wail of the damned. I rolled, shielding them with my back, feeling the heat lick at my jacket, feeling the glass slice through my sleeves. I did not let go. When the ringing in my ears faded, when the smoke began to clear, I pushed myself up on bloody elbows and looked toward the balcony. Marco stood there, ARM in ARM with Celeste, a detonator still smoking in his hand. Behind them, 6 men with automatic weapons fanned out, guariding their escape. The senator's men, the FBI. The entire network of traitors was there, in the open, their masks finally fallen. Happy birthday, Vincent, Marco called out, his voice rang over the groans of the wounded. You should have retired when I told you to, or maybe you should have died in the gutter where you were born. I looked down at the child beneath me. She was gazing up at me, her ancient eyes clear and fearless despite the blood on my face, despite the dead and dying scattered around us. Angels, she whispered. They told me you would save us. And in that moment, with my world crumbling around me, with the betrayal of everyone I loved laid bare at my feet, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would burn this city to the ground to protect this child. I would tear the traitors apart with my bare hands. I would find my brother if he was still alive, and I would bring him home. The detonator clicked. Marco and Celeste disappeared through the smoke. And Vincent Caruso, the most powerful man in New York, knelt in the rubble and made a silent vow. They had taken everything from me. They had planted bombs in my house and betrayal in my bed. They had forgotten who they were dealing with. 3 days. 72 hours of hell, and I had barely slept. The estate was a red skeleton of what it had been, the ballroom sealed off by the NYPD and every alphabet agency that could find an excuse to poke through the wreckage. 12 dead. 37 wounded, some of them so badly burned they would never walk again. My personal security team had been decimated, leaving me with a skeleton crew of loyalists who had been lucky enough to be on perimeter duty when the bombs went off. I sat in my private study at the safe house, my 4 arms wrapped in gauze from the glass shards I'd taken to shield the maid and her child. The doctors had wanted me in the hospital, but I had refused. Hospitals where empires go to die, where rival factions send their assassins dressed as orderlies. I had survived 30 years by trusting no one, and I would not start now, but there was one person I had trusted, or at least someone I owed a debt I could never repay. When I gave the order to have Anna Kovacs and her daughter brought to me, I didn't expect them to show up in the middle of the night, trembling and pale, clutching the same faded dresses they'd worn at the party. Lily was half asleep on her mother's shoulder, her dark curls crushed against Anna's neck. The maid was barely more than a girl herself, perhaps 26, with a face that had seen too much hardship and eyes that held a strange, watchful intelligence. She had been with my household for 5 years, cleaning the offices, organizing the files, moving through my world like a ghost. I had noticed her about as much as I noticed the furniture. That was my second mistake. You should be in witness protection, I said, pouring myself a glass of whiskey I didn't want. Why are you here? Anna's voice was quiet but steady, a thread of steel buried in velvet. Because I know who else is coming for you, Mr. Caruso. And I know what they took from you. I set the glass down and studied her. She was terrified. That much was obvious. Her hands were shaking, her jaw clenched to keep her teeth from chattering. But there was something else there, something that looked a lot like determination. Speak, I said. She took a breath, closing her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, I saw her push past the FIA. I've worked in your main offices for the last 3 years, Mr. Caruso. The records room, the filing, the mail. I see things. People forget that the staff have EARS. They talk around us like we're nothing, like we can't understand what they're saying. I nodded slowly. In my experience, the servants were the ones who saw everything. The ones who kept the secrets and whispered them to each other in the kitchens. I should have cultivated more of them over the years. What did you see? Anna, her eyes flickered to Lily, who had woken and was watching me with those ancient, knowing eyes. The toddler didn't blink, didn't smile. She just looked at me like she could see straight through my bones. Marco had been meeting with Ms. Celeste for months. Anna continued. In your private office, always on the nights you were away. I clean that office, Mr. Caruso. I empty the trash, I straighten the papers, I know when something is out of place. They thought they were refill, but I saw. I heroed. My jaw tightened. And what did they discuss? They planned the bombing. Ms. Celeste convinced her father to provide the explosives and the federal cover. Marco had been recruiting your security team for months, replacing the men you trusted with his own people. They knew everything. They knew when you would be at the estate, where you would stand during the party, the distance of the balcony from the main stage. They planned it down to the second. I felt the rage building, a cold fire in my chest. It was not surprise I felt. I had suspected as much, but the confirmation of betrayal still burned. I had given Marco everything. I had treated him like a brother. And he had taken a knife to my back and twisted. But Anna wasn't finished. There's more, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They have your brother. The room tilted. I grabbed the edge of the desk to steady myself.
Luca.
My little brother. 10 years dead, or so I had thought, killed in a CAR bombing that had been ruled an accident by the police. I had mourned him, had held his memory close, had built my empire in party to honor the boy who had taught me to sing when the world was dark. He's dead. I managed. I saw the body. I identified him. Anna shook her head slowly, tears streaming down her face. The body was someone else. I saw the pictures, Mr. Caruso, in Marco's desk. Your brother is alive. They've been keeping him in a facility in Queens, a place that doesn't exist on any map. Ms. Celeste's father used his government contacts to keep it off the books. It's been 10 years. They've been torturing him for 10 years. The whiskey glass shattered in my grip. I felt the glass cutting into my palm. All I could see was Luca, the boy who had worshipped me, who had followed me everywhere, who had been the only family I had left after our parents were murdered. He had been alive this whole time, and I had been so busy building my empire that I had never thought to question the accident. Mommy, Lily said softly, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Uncle Luca sings. Anna looked at her daughter, her face pale.
She dreams about him.
She sees him in a dark room, tied to a chair. He sings to keep from going mad. I dropped to my knees before the child, my bloodied hand hidden behind my back, not wanting to frighten her. Lily, I said, keeping my voice as gentle as I could. Do you know how to find him? She nodded solemnly. The bad place with the water. There's a big boat that never moves, and a fence with RP points. Uncle Luca is in a box in the ground. It's cold, Mr. Vincent. He's so cold. I looked at Anna, who was crying silently now, her arms wrapped around herself. She's always been like this, she whispered. When she was a baby, she would scream before I got sick. She told me about her father's accident before the phone rang. I don't understand it, but I trust her. I always trust her. I rose to my feet, my heart pounding with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. This was what I was built for. Not the parties, not the alliances, not the endless negotiations.
This.
The rescue, the revenge, the protection of the innocent. Anna, I said, I need you to work with me. You'll be my eyes and ears. Your daughter will be my compass. If we find Luca, if we bring him home, I will protect you and Lily with my life. I swear it on my parents' grave. She looked at me, and I saw something shift in her gaze. Fear, yes. But also something that looked a lot like hope. We're already dead if Marco finds us, she said quietly. At least this way, we die fighting. Lily reached out and touched my face with her sticky hand. Angels say we win, she told me. They always keep their promises. I didn't believe in angels. But looking into that little girl's eyes, I allowed myself to believe in something I hadn't believed in a very long time. I believed in a second chance. 7 days of planning. 7 days of moving pieces across a boa RD that had been shattered and scattered. My network had been decimated in the bombing, but the men who remained were the ones who mattered, the ones who had been with me since the beginning, who remembered when we were nothing but hungry kids fighting for scraps in the East Side alleys. They came to me in the dead of night, slipping through the shadows of a safe house like ghosts, and they brought what I needed: weapons, intelligence, and most importantly, loyalty. Anna became my shadow during those days. She was at every meeting, her face pale but her posture fierce, and I watched as the men, hardened killers who had never taken orders from a woman, slowly began to defer to her. She had a gift for seeing the patterns that others missed, for piecing together scraps of information into a coherent whole. She knew the names of Marco's informants, the location of his backup weapons, the weaknesses in his defenses that even his own lieutenants had forgotten. But it was Lily who was the true asset. She sat in the corner of the war room every night, a coloring book in her lap and crayons scattered around her like fallen soldiers. She never seemed to pay attention to the discussions, but when we reached a dead end, she would look up with those ancient eyes and say something that shifted the entire conversation. "The bad man with the SCA is watching from across the street," she said one evening, without looking up from her drawing. I moved to the window, pulling back the curtain a fraction of an inch. There, parked beneath a flickering streetlight, was a sedan I didn't recognize. 2 men inside, both of them watching the building. My men moved before I had to give the order. They slipped out the back, circled around, and within 10 minutes, they had the spy in the basement, his wrists bound, and his face a bloody mess. Marco's man. He had been tailing us for days, waiting for the right moment to call in a strike team. I didn't need to interrogate him. The terror in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. Marco was getting desperate. He had taken my empire, but he hadn't taken my resolve, and he was beginning to realize that the man he had betrayed was not a man who would simply curl up and die. When I returned to the war room, Anna was holding Lily, rocking her gently, her face wet with tears. The girl had fallen asleep, exhausted by the gift that she could not control. "How does she know these things?" I asked softly. Anna looked at me with haunted eyes. "She's always known. When she was a baby, she would wake up screaming hours before something terrible happened. She told me about the CAR accident that killed her father before the police arrived to deliver the news. I didn't understand it then, and I don't understand it now. I've just learned to trust it." I knelt beside them, looking at the sleeping child. Her face was peaceful, the face of any ordinary toddler, but I knew better. This was no ordinary child. She was something else entirely, something the world didn't have a word for. "Does she see everything?" I asked. "Everything that's going to happen," Anna shook her head. "She sees what the angels show her. She calls them angels. I don't know what they really are, but when they speak, she listens. And she's always right." I thought of Luca, trapped in his box in the ground. Lily had seen him, had told me he was cold and singing. I had spent the last 7 days trying to confirm the existence of that facility, and every piece of intelligence my men brought back pointed to the same thing. There was a location in Queens, a waterfront property that had been red-flagged by federal agencies, but never investigated. It was heavily guarded, heavily fortified, and it didn't show up on any public records. "It was where they were keeping my brother." "Lily," I whispered, "can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me with that ancient, knowing gaze. "Uncle Luca is crying tonight, Mr. Vincent. He's SCA red. The bad men came and hurt him because they saw us coming." I felt my blood run cold. "They know we're coming," she nodded solemnly. "The angels say we need to be faster. We need to go now, before they move him again." I looked at Anna, who had gone pale. "They're going to kill him if I don't act," I said. "They'll move him, or worse." "Then we go now," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Tonight." I couldn't have planned it better myself. My men were already in position. The weapons were ready. The vehicles were gassed and waiting. I looked at Lily, this tiny child who had changed the course of everything, who had seen through the lies and the masks and had spoken the truth when no one else would. "When this is over," I told her, "I'll give you anything you want. Any toy, any dress, any dream." She smiled, a heartbreakingly innocent smile, and reached up to touch my cheek. "I want Mommy to be happy," she said. "And I want you to be happy, Mr. Vincent. I want everyone to be happy." I kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it surprised me, and then I stood up and strapped on my weapons. "Let's go get Uncle Luca," I said, and the war room emptied, leaving only a coloring book, a pile of crayons, and a little girl's drawing of a man with wings, flying above a dark and terrible prison. The front company was a boutique in Soho, all white marble and gold fixtures, a place where wealthy women came to spend their husbands' money on dresses that cost more than most people's
Rent.
It was the perfect cover. After the bombing, I had relocated my operations there, positioning Anna as the manager and Lily as the unofficial mascot of the operation. It gave me a reason to have them close, a reason to parade them in public, a reason to let Americo's spies see that I was hiding in plain sight. Celeste walked through the door at 11 in the morning, flanked by 4 bodyguards who looked like they'd been borrowed from a federal task force. She wore Chanel from head to toe, her hair swept up in a perfect chignon, her engagement ring conspicuously absent from her finger. The dress she had chosen was white, a deliberate provocation, the color of purity and innocence that she had never possessed. I was behind the register, dressed in a simple black suit that probably made me look more like a salesman than a crime lord. That was the point. Let her think I had been reduced to this, that the bombing had broken me, that I was just a hollow shell of the man I had been. "Vincent darling," she purred, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "I've always wanted to shop here. What a coincidence." I didn't look up from the paperwork I was pretending to read. There are no coincidences in our world, Celeste. You know that. She approached me, her bodyguards fanning out to cover the exits. She was close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same expensive scent she had worn when she was in my bed, in my confidence, in my heart. It turned my stomach. "Marco has everything now, Vincent," she said, her voice low and intimate. "The territories, the connections, the legitimate fronts. He controls what you spent 30 years building. But there's something he doesn't have." I finally looked at her. "And what's that?" She smiled, a cold, calculated smile that had once made me think she was mysterious and alluring. Now I saw it for what it was, the smile of a predator who had already taken her kill and was circling back for the scraps, the intimidation factor, she said. "You've always been SCA, Vincent. That was your gift. Marco is a capable administrator, but he doesn't have your presence. He doesn't have your reputation. The other families sta rooting to get restless. They remember what you did to the Russians. They remember the letter opener. They aren't sure if Marco can do the same." I set down the paperwork and folded my arse. "Get to the point, Celeste. I don't have time for your games." Her smile faltered for just a moment, and I saw the flicker of insecurity beneath the mask.
It was almost satisfying.
"Come work for us," she said. "We'll keep you as a figurehead, a ghost to haunt the other families. You'll still have your money, your lifestyle. You can live out your days in comfort, playing the party of the retired king. I might even consider taking you back." I laughed. It was a hollow, bitter sound, and it seemed to echo off the marble walls. "You want me to be a puppet while you and Marco run my empire. You want me to smile and nod while you take credit for my work. And what about Luca? What happens to him?" The name hit her like a slap. She recoiled, her composure cracking, and for the first time, I saw the fear in her eyes. "How do you know about Luca?" "Because your treachery is amateur hour," I said, stepping closer to her, watching her bodyguards tense. You think you can destroy a man who survived the East Side War RS, who killed the dawn of the Russian mob with a letter opener, who took over this city before you were old enough to wear lipstick. I've been in this game since before you were born, Celeste. You can't SCA me, and you can't buy me. All you can do is make me angry. She backed away, her hand reaching for the door. You're insane, she whispered. Marco wanted to give you a chance. I told him you would be difficult. I told him we should just kill you and be done with it. Behind me, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps. Anna had emerged from the stockroom. Lily balanced on her hip, her face pale but determined. She had been listening to everything, gathering the intelligence that would become the weapon I needed. Celeste's eyes narrowed as they landed on the maid. And you're taking orders from a maid now. How fa are you fallen, Vincent? How pathetic you've become. Lily's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She has more courage than you, princess. The silence that followed was absolute. Celeste's bodyguard RDS shifted uneasily, their hands moving Tawa RD their weapons. Celeste herself looked as if she'd been slapped, her mouth hanging open, her eyes wide with disbelief. What did you say to me? She hissed. She said you lack courage. I repeated calmly. And she's right. You've never fought for anything in your life. Everything you have, you took from someone else. Marco, your father, me. You're a parasite, Celeste, and parasites don't survive when their host dies. I stepped closer to her, close enough that my voice dropped to a whisper. Now get out of my store before I forget that you're a woman. Her face contorted with rage, all pretense of sophistication stripped away. You're going to regret this, she spat. Marco wanted to give you a chance, but not me. I'm going to enjoy watching you burn. I'm going to enjoy watching your brother die. I'm going to enjoy watching that little brat and her whore mother suffer. Lily didn't flinch. She just read at Celeste with those ancient, knowing eyes, and I saw something pass between them that made Celeste take a step back. Your baby is crying, Lily said softly. He's crying because he knows you don't love him. Celeste went white, her composure completely shattered. I saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes, the memory of the secret she had buried deep, the child she had sacrificed for her father's political ambitions. She fled without another word, her bodyguard RDS scrambling after her. The door slammed behind them, and the boutique was suddenly too quiet. Anna let out a long, shaky breath. She'll send someone to hurt us. She won't let that go. No, I said, watching the street through the glass front of the boutique. She won't have time. Tonight, we get Luca. Tomorrow, I burn their world to the ground. Lily reached out and touched my hand. She's SCA red, Mr. Vincent. She's very SCA red. The angels say she'll run away. I looked at the little girl, at the wisdom in her eyes, and I believed her. Let her run, I said. I'll find her anyway. And I would. Wherever she went, whoever she hid behind, I would find her, and I would make her pay for what she had done to my family, to my brother, to this innocent child who had shown me more kindness than anyone in my entire life. The facility in Queens looked like a medical research center from the outside, all glass and steel and sterile white lighting. The kind of place where rich people went to get experimental treatments that the FDA hadn't approved yet. But I knew better. I knew what was really happening behind those walls, in the basement levels that didn't are on any public blueprint, in the soundproof cells where men like my brother had been tortured for us. We parked the surveillance van 3 blocks away, in the shadow of an abandoned Wari house that had been a front for my operations back in the 90s. The irony wasn't lost on me. Everything in the city came back to me eventually. The buildings, the connections, the secrets. Marco might have taken my empire, but he couldn't erase my history. He couldn't erase the fact that I knew this city better than he ever would. Lily sat in the back of the van with her mother, her eyes closed, her small body perfectly still. She had been like this for the last hour, and I had reneged not to disturb her. When she was like this, she was seeing things, hearing things, sensing the world in a way that the rest of us couldn't comprehend. Anna held her daughter's hand, her lips moving silently in what I assumed was a prayer. She had been terrified when I told her she had to be in the van, that we might need Lily's guidance during the extraction. But she had agreed, because she knew that her daughter's gift was the key to this entire operation. 3 guardias at the east entrance, Lily murmured, her eyes still closed. 2 more on the rooftop. They're moving to the west side now. There's a gap in the floodlights. I relayed the information to my team through the comms. 6 men, all of them veterans of the east side Juarez, all of them loyal to me even when it meant certain death. They moved like shadows through the darkness, taking out the guardias with silenced pistols and suppressed knives. North corridor, Lily said, her voice a Relia whisper. 2 more coming down the stairs. They're talking about a transfer. I relayed that too, and my men adjusted their positions, lying in wait for the 2 guardias who came around the corner a moment later. They didn't even have time to scream. Luca is in the basement, Lily said, and her voice cracked slightly. He's in a box. Dark and cold. He's singing to himself. The song is about a girl named Maria who lives by the sea. My heart clenched. Maria was our mother. The song was one she used to sing to us when we were children, before our parents were murdered in front of us. Luca was holding onto the memory of her, using it to keep himself sane in the darkness. He had been doing that for 10 years. I gave the order to advance. My men moved into the facility, clear ring rooms as they went, leaving a trail of unconscious or dead guardias behind them. I followed close behind, my own weapons drawn, my heart pounding with a mixture of rage and anticipation. I had waited 10 years for this. I had mourned my brother, built an empire in his memory, and now I was going to bring him home. The basement was a maze of concrete corridors and reinforced doors. Each one was locked with a keypad, but Lily guided us through, telling us which codes to enter, which doors to avoid. She was seeing the facility through Luca's eyes, I realized. She was seeing the guardias through his memories. Turn left, she whispered.
No, right.
The left door is rigged. I trusted her without hesitation, and my men followed my lead. We found the cell at the end of a long hallway, a concrete box with no windows and a heavy steel door that was bolted from the outside. I could hear singing from within, a soft, broken voice that was rely more than a whisper. I slammed my fist against the door.
Luca.
It's Vincent. I'm here. The singing stopped. Silence. And then a choked sob, followed by a voice that was so RSE, I almost didn't recognize it. Vinny, is it really you? I'm here, I said, my voice cracking despite myself. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm getting you out. The bolts were heavy, but my men had brought a torch. We cut through the steel in minutes, and when the door finally swung open, I saw my brother for the first time in 10 years. He was a ghost of the man I remembered. Gaunt and gray, with skin stretched tight over bones and eyes that had been hollowed out by a decade of torture. He was chained to a chair, his wrists raw and bloody, his clothes nothing but rags. But when he saw me, something flickered in his gaze. Recognition.
Hope.
I dropped to my knees in front of him, cutting through the chains with my knife. I'm here, I said again. I'm here, Luca. I've got you. He collapsed against me, his body shaking with sobs. They told me you were dead, he whispered. They showed me pictures.
They said you'd abandon me.
Never, I said fiercely. I would never abandon you. They lied to both of us. The building shook above us. Gunfire echoed through the corridors. Bad men with big guns. Lily's voice crackled through the comms. They're coming through the south entrance. Lots of them. I pulled Luca to his feet, throwing his ARM over my shoulders. My men closed ranks around us, covering our retreat. The corridor was a nightmare of smoke and gunfire as we fought our way back to the surface. Luca stumbled, his legs too weak to CARRY him. I half CA'd him, half dragged him through the chaos, returning fire with one hand while I shielded my brother with my body. We're almost there. I yelled over the din, hold on. The extraction van was waiting 3 blocks away, its engine running. My men held the line as we threw ourselves inside, tires screeching as we sped into the night. Luca collapsed against me, sobbing. Anna gathered Lily into her ARS, rocking her gently. The little girl was pale and shaking, exhausted by the vision that had drained her. "It's okay," I said, holding my brother. "You're safe now. I've got you." And I did. For the first time in a decade, I had my brother back. Tomorrow, the reckoning would begin. Tonight, I let myself feel the hope I had thought was lost forever. Lucas slept for 14 hours straight, and I let him. He had reneged the rest, reneged the peace, reneged the right to dream of something other than concrete walls and cold chains. I sat by his bedside for most of it, watching him breathe, listening to him murmur in his sleep. Our mother's name, my name, and sometimes the names of his torturers. I noted those names down. They would pay. When he finally woke, he looked better, though still broken. The doctors I had brought in had cleaned his wounds, given him fluids, patched him up as best they could. But some wounds don't show on the surface. Some wounds revet into the soul, and they take years to heal. If they heal at all, I told him everything. About Americo's betrayal, Celeste's role, the bombing at the estate, the network I had spent 10 years building around his memory. I told him about Anna and Lily, about the little girl who had seen him in the darkness and brought me to him. I told him about Victor, about the final betrayal that had broken my heart more than any other. He listened in silence, his eyes wet with tears, but his face hot with a rage I recognized. It was the same rage I had ride for years. It was the Caruso rage, the fire that had driven our family through generations of poverty and violence and survival. "They didn't just take my life," Lucas said finally, his voice a rasp. "They took my mind. They took my hope. They made me forget who I was." "Then we'll remind you," I said.
Together.
"We'll build something new, something better. We'll make them pay for what they did, and then we'll move four-way road. But first, I need to know everything you know. Where they kept you, who they reported to, every detail you can remember."
Luca nodded slowly.
And then he began to talk that the information he gave me was a goldmine. 10 years of captivity, and he had listened, watched, catalogued everything. He knew the names of the guardias who had tormented him. He knew the schedules of the doctors who had drugged him for so long that he had forgotten his own name. He knew the layout of the facility, the location of the backup generators, the codes that Americo's people used to communicate with their federal handlers, but most importantly, he knew where Marco had hidden his backup assets. The casinos, the shipping docks, the money laundering fronts that had been the foundation of my empire. They were all connected, all reliant on a single financial hub that Marco had set up in a high-rise on Wall Street. "He's not as smart as he thinks he is," Lucas said. "He used the same systems I did, the same codes, the same protocols. He just changed the names on the accounts. I was the one who designed those systems, Vinny. I built the digital infrastructure of your empire. And I made sure I was the only one who knew how to break it." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "How long would it take you to do it?" Luca looked at his shaking hands, the hands that had been beaten and broken, and Estierved. "Give me 3 days to get my strength back. And a laptop with a secure connection. I'll do the rest." I gave him both. And while he worked, I mobilized my men. The first strike came at midnight. We hit Americo's casino operations simultaneously across 3 boroughs, taking out his security, shutting down his tables, emptying his vaults. The second strike came 2 hours later, targeting the shipping docks where Marco was running his weapons and drug operations. My men were surgical, precise, leaving nothing but rubble and confusion in their wake. By dawn, Marco had lost half of everything he'd stolen from me. His phone lines were jammed, his network in chaos, his lieutenants scrambling to figure out what was happening. He had no idea that the attacks were coordinated, no idea that the architect of his destruction was the brother he had kept chained in a basement for a decade. At the third strike, my men hit the money laundering fronts in Soho and Midtown. The boutiques, the restaurants, the nightclubs, all of them went to RK, their accounts frozen, their employees sent home. I had copies of the financial records, all of them, thanks to Luca's genius. I could destroy Americo's entire economic infrastructure in a single day, but I didn't want to destroy it. I wanted to take it back. Celeste called me at noon. I could hear the panic in her voice. the CA refully constructed composure crumbling. "You can't do this," she said. "You don't have the resources. You don't have the manpower. MARCO has the federal connections, the politicians, the— Tell me where you're hiding." I cut her off. "Tell me where you've been sleeping since you betrayed me, Celeste. I want to see your face when the rest of your world collapses." She was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice that was barely a whisper, she said, "I'm at my father's estate in the Hamptons. The security is tight. You can't get to me." "I don't need to get to you," I said. "I need you to watch. I need you to watch everything you've ever loved burn to the ground." I hung up, and I gave the order for the final strike. The Wall Street high-rise was taken in a coordinated assault that looked like a police raid. My men, dressed in tactical HEA, swept through the building floor by floor, neutralizing the security guards, securing the servers. Luca had given us the codes, and within an hour, we had full control of MARCO's financial empire. By evening, MARCO had nothing left. His operations were rubble. His accounts were frozen. His lieutenants had scattered like roaches, and his federal handlers had gone silent, unwilling to be associated with such a spectacle. Our failure. I called him on a burner phone. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," I said. "Now you're going to watch everything burn, and then I'm going to come for you." "Vincent," he said, and for the first time, I heard genuine fear in his voice. "Let's talk about this. We can negotiate. I have information, things that can help you." "I don't want information," I said. "I want your head on a platter. And I'm going to get it." I hung up, and I smiled. The hunt was on. The Falcone building was a crumbling tenement in Little Italy, a relic of the old neighborhood where I had grown up. It had been abandoned for years, condemned by the city and left to rot. But I knew it well. This was where I had taken my first beating, where I had learned to fight, where I had killed my first man at the age of 16, a lone shot who had threatened to break my mother's fingers. The building was a graveyard of my youth, and I had chosen it as MARCO's tomb. I went alone, my men surrounded the perimeter, but I walked through the front door like a specter, my footsteps echoing in the empty lobby. The building was dark, the windows boarded up, the walls covered in graffiti. But I could see the faint glow of light coming from the top floor, and I knew he was waiting for me. The stairs creaked beneath my feet as I climbed. Each step was a memory, each landing a ghost. I had spent my childhood in this building, hiding from the cops, hiding from the rival gangs, hiding from the future that I had no reason to believe would ever be anything but bleak. And now I was here to reclaim my past, to bury it once and for all. The penthouse door was open. MARCO sat in a chair by the window, a glass of scotch in his hand, a gun on the table beside him. He looked tired, his eyes hollow, his face lined with the stress of the last few days. He had lost everything, and he knew it. This was his last stand, his final attempt at dignity. "Vincent," he said, almost casually, "I knew you'd come. Then you know how this ends." He shrugged, a realist gesture that didn't quite hide the tremor in his hand. "Maybe. Maybe not. You should know something before you do anything rash." I stopped in the middle of the room, my hands at my sides, my eyes fixed on his. "I know everything," I said. "I know about the bombing, about the facility in Queens, about the torture of my brother. I know about Celeste and her father. I know about Victor." MARCO's eyes widened slightly. "Victor, how do you know about Victor?" "Because you told me," I said. "Just before you tried to kill me. You wanted me to know how deep the betrayal went. You wanted me to suffer." He laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "You think I told you? I never told you anything, Vincent. You found out on your own. That's the tragedy of it. You could have lived in ignorance, could have enjoyed whatever time you had left. But you had to dig, had to know, had to destroy everything you touched." I took a step closer. "What are you talking about?" MARCO set down the glass and leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with something that looked like satisfaction. "Victor Moretti, your godfather. The man who raised you after your parents died. He's been working with the FBI for 20 years. He was the one who orchestrated the entire operation, the bombing, the kidnapping, the takeover. He's dying, Vincent. Cancer. He wanted to take down the Caruso empire before he went, so he could be remembered as a hero. Your hero. The man who cleaned up the streets of New York. The room tilted. I felt the walls closing in, the weight of a decade of betrayal pressing down on my shoulders.
Victor.
The man who had taught me everything, who had been a father to me when I had no one else. He had sold me out to the government, had sold my brother to a torture chamber, had sold my mother's memory to the highest bidder. Celeste's father was his political conduit. Marco continued, savoring every word. The senator provided the federal cover, the resources, the legitimacy. Victor provided the inside information, the access, the trust. They planned this together for Yaris. And when Victor dies, he'll be remembered as a hero. The man who brought down the Caruso syndicate. I felt the rage building, a cold fire in my chest. But I didn't move. I didn't give Marco the satisfaction of seeing me break. Surprise, Marco said, the word dripping with mockery. And then I did move. I was faster than he could react. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling across the floor. The gun slid out of reach, and I kicked it away, pinning him beneath me. You took everything from me, I growled, slamming my fist into his face. My brother, my empire, my peace of mind. You don't deserve a quick death. Marco's lips split, blood spilling down his chin. He tried to fight back, but I was stronger, fueled by a decade of grief and rage. I hit him again and again, feeling his ribs crack beneath my fists, hearing the sickening crunch of his nose breaking. Don't, he gasped, his voice a relia whisper. Don't kill me. I have more information. I can give you. I don't want what you can give me, I said. I want what I can take. I dragged him to his feet and threw him against the window. The glass shattered, and he fell back way RD, his hands grasping at the frame. I leaned over him, watching him dangle over the street below. Please, he begged. I have a family. My children. Your children are safer without you, I said. You're a monster, Marco. And monsters don't get happy endings. I let him fall. The impact echoed up through the building, a sickening crunch that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. I stood there for a long moment, sta ring at the broken glass, the empty frame, the night beyond. Then I turned and walked away. The building was quiet as I descended, my footsteps echoing in the dark. When I reached the lobby, I saw the streetlights flickering through the broken windows. And I knew in that moment that something had changed. The anger was still there, the grief, the pain. But there was also something else. Something that felt almost like peace. I had avenged my brother. I had destroyed the man who had betrayed me. Tomorrow, I would face Victor. Tomorrow, I would burn the final bridge. But tonight, I was Vincent Caruso. And I was still standing. Victor's estate was in Connecticut, a sprawling colonial mansion surrounded by manicured lawns and ancient oaks. It was the home I had grown up in, the place where I had rened to read, to fight, to survive. It had always felt like a sanctuary, a refuge from the violence of the streets. But now it felt like a mausoleum, a monument to the lies that had built my life. I walked through the front door, without knocking. The FBI agents who were stationed there drew their weapons, but I ignored them. They were pawns, just like everyone else in this game. They had no idea what was really happening, no idea that the man they were protecting was the architect of their own deception. Victor was in the study, sitting in his favorite chair by the fireplace. He looked older than I remembered, his face gaunt, his eyes sunken. The cancer had been eating him alive for years, and I could see the toll it had taken. But there was still a spark in his gaze, a flicker of the cunning that had made him a legend. Vincent, he said, rising slowly. I didn't expect you to come here. Didn't you? I asked, my voice flat. You knew I'd find out eventually. You just didn't think it would be this soon. The FBI agents moved to intercept me, but Victor waved them off. Leave us, he said. This is between me and my godson. They hesitated, but they obeyed. The door closed behind them, and I was alone with the man who had raised me, the man who had betrayed me. You look like your mother, Victor said softly. She had the same fire in her eyes when she was angry. "Don't talk about my mother," I said. "You don't have the right." He sank back into his chair, his shoulders slumping. "I know what you think of me. I know you hate me. And you have every right. But you need to understand why I did what I did." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You were dying, and you wanted to leave behind a legacy. You wanted to be remembered as the man who brought down the Caruso syndicate. The hero. The good guy." Victor shook his head slowly.
No.
"That's not it. That's what I told MARCO and the senator, but it's not the truth." I read at him, my hands clenched into fists. "Then what is the truth?" He looked at me with eyes that were filled with regret, with grief, with something that looked almost like love. "Your parents, Vincent. Your mother and father. They were murdered, and I never told you the truth about who killed them." "I know who killed them," I said. "The Moretti rivals. The Wa-R. You told me." "I lied." His voice cracked. "I lied to protect you. To protect myself. Your parents were killed by my partners. The men I trusted, the men I built this empire with. They were betrayed by their own people, Vincent. Just like you were betrayed by MARCO. And I was the one who let it happen." I felt the floor drop out from under me. "What are you saying?" Victor closed his eyes, and I saw a tear slide down his weathered cheek. "I was young and ambitious. I made alliances with the wrong people, and when they decided to eliminate your father, I didn't stop them. I told myself it was business, that it was necessary, that I was doing what I had to do to survive. But it was cowardice. Pure and simple. And I've been trying to atone for it ever since." "You let them die," I said, my voice a whisper. "You let my parents die, and then you lied to me about it for 30 years. "I tried to make it right," he said, his voice rising. "I took you in. I raised you. I taught you everything I knew. And when I found out that the senator and MARCO were planning to take you down, I tried to protect you in the only way I knew how. I joined them. I fed them information. But I also kept you alive. I made sure the bombing wasn't lethal. I made sure Lucas stayed alive, even when they wanted to kill him. Everything I did to protect you." I felt the rage boiling inside me, hot and uncontrollable. "You protected me. You destroyed my empire, my family, my peace of mind. You took my brother and locked him in a cage for 10 years. You call that protection, I call it penance," Victor said. "I knew you would never forgive me for what I did to your parents. So I gave you the one thing I knew you would never stop fighting for. I gave you revenge." I read at him, the words slowly sinking in. He had orchestrated everything, the betrayal, the kidnapping, the bombing, not to destroy me, but to give me the motivation to destroy his enemies. He had used himself as bait, as a target, as a symbol of everything I had to overcome. "You made yourself the villain," I said slowly. "So I would have someone to hate, someone to fight." Victor nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I'm dying, Vincent. I have months left, maybe weeks.
I wanted to leave you with something.
A purpose, a reason to keep fighting. And when it's over, you'll be free. Free of the empire, free of the past, free of me." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The man I had hated, the man I had sworn to destroy, had been trying to save me all along. In the worst possible way, in the most twisted and destructive way imaginable. But he had been trying to save me. "I don't know what to do with this," I said finally. "I don't know how to feel." Victor reached out, his hand trembling. "Feel whatever you need to feel. Hate me if you have to. But promise me one thing. Promise me you'll take care of Luca. Promise me you'll build something good, something that would have made your parents proud." I looked at his hand, at the frail, shaking fingers that had once held me as a child. And slowly I took it. "I promise," I said. He smiled, a sad, broken smile. And then I turned and walked out the door, leaving the FBI agents and the tragedy and the past behind me. I had come to Victor's estate to destroy him, and I had destroyed him. But not in the way I had expected. The cancer would take him soon. And when it did, I would mourn him, Because he was my father, in every way that mattered. And nothing, not even the truth, could change that. The weeks after Victor's confession were the hardest of my life. The empire was in ruins, the underworld in chaos, and I found myself in the ruins of my office, staring at photographs of my parents and wondering what they would have thought of the man I had become. Marco was dead. Celeste and her father had fled the country, leaving behind a trail of frozen assets and broken promises. Victor was in prison, though the cancer was taking him faster than the justice system ever could. The men I had once commanded had scattered to the winds, joining other families or disappearing into legitimate businesses, and I was alone. The king of nothing, sitting on a throne of ashes. Anna found me there late one night, Lily asleep on her shoulder. She had been living in the safe house since the rescue, California ring for Luca, helping him recover from his decade of captivity. She had become a fixture in my life, a constant presence that I had come to rely on more than I wanted to admit. "You should be celebrating," she said softly, setting Lily down on the couch. "You got your revenge. You saved your brother. The traitors are gone." "Celebrating what?" I asked, not looking away from the photographs. "I've lost everything. Victor was the last piece of my family, and now he's going to die in a prison cell. There's nothing left." Anna sat beside me, her hand resting on my arm. "You have Luca. You have the people who stayed loyal. And you have us." I finally looked at her. Her face was calm, her eyes steady, and I saw something in them that I hadn't seen in a long time. Compassion, understanding, perhaps even love. "You should hate me," I said. "I dragged you into this world, put you and your daughter in danger. You could have died a dozen times."
"I didn't die," she said.
"And neither did you. That's what matters. We survived, Vincent. We're still here." Lily stirred on the couch, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at me with those ancient, knowing eyes, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Not all the bad men are gone," she said softly. "There's one more. He's very sad." I read at her.
"Who?" She pointed at me.
"You, Mr. Vincent. You're the one who's sad. You need to forgive yourself." The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. How could this child see what I had been hiding for decades? How could she know about the guilt, the shame, the endless self-recrimination that had driven me to build an empire out of blood and violence? Anna took my hand, her grip firm. "I know about your parents, Vincent. Victor told me everything. He told me what really happened the night they died. He told me that you tried to save them, that you were just a child, and you couldn't stop it." I pulled away, my heart pounding. "He had no right to tell you that." "He had every right," she said gently. "Because you've been carrying this guilt for 30 years, and you need to let it go. You were a child, Vincent. A child who loved his parents and couldn't save them. That's not your fault. It was never your fault. The TRS came before I could stop them. 30 years of grief, 30 years of rage, 30 years of blaming myself for something I couldn't have prevented. I had built an empire to prove that I was strong enough to protect the people I loved, but it had never been enough. It would never be enough. The men who killed your parents were Victor's partners," Anna continued. "He tried to stop them, but he was too late. He's been trying to make it right ever since, the only way he knew how. He orchestrated the whole thing, Marco, Celeste, the FBI, so that you would have someone to fight, someone to hate. He wanted you to have closure. And now he's going to die in prison because of me," I said, my voice breaking, because I couldn't let go of my anger. "He wanted to be caught," Anna said. "He told me. He said he couldn't face you, couldn't ask for your forgiveness. So he arranged his own punishment. He wanted you to be free, even if it cost him everything." Lily climbed off the couch and walked over to me, her small hands touching my face. "Forgive him, Mr. Vincent.
He's sorry.
He loves you." I knelt down, pulling her into my arms. She was so small, so fragile, and yet she had more wisdom in her tiny body than I had accumulated in 50 years of life. "How do you know these things?" I whispered. "How do you see what the rest of us can't?" She looked at me with those ancient eyes. "Because the angels told me." They said you needed to be loved. They said you deserved to be happy. I held her for a long time, crying like I hadn't cried since I was a child. Anna knelt beside me, her arms around both of us, and we sat there in the ruins of my office, a broken family holding onto each other. When I finally stopped crying, I felt lighter. The weight of 30 years had lifted, and I could breathe again. "Thank you," I said, looking at Anna. "Thank you for everything." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "We're a family, Vincent. That's what families do. They save each other." I looked at Lily, this miraculous child who had changed everything. "What do I do now?" I asked her. She smiled, a beatific smile that seemed to light up the room. "You build something new," she said. "Something good. Something that makes the angels proud." I didn't believe in angels. But looking at that child, I allowed myself to hope. 6 months after the bombing, I stood in front of a newly renovated building in Midtown, watching the workers put the finishing touches on the facade. It had once been a front for money laundering, a place where Marco had funneled millions through shell companies and fake accounts. Now it was something else entirely. Now it was the headquarters of the Caruso Foundation for Children's Welfare. The transition hadn't been easy. I had liquidated most of my remaining assets, sold off the legitimate businesses that had been tainted by their connection to the underworld. The money I had earned through blood and violence was now being channeled into orphanages, hospitals, and programs for troubled youth. It was the only way I could think of to make amends for the decades I had spent building an empire on the suffering of others. Luca was my partner in the venture. He had recovered slowly, the physical wounds healing faster than the psychological ones. But he had found purpose in the foundation, a way to use his genius for systems and organization to help children who had been failed by the world. He was the one who designed the programs, who vetted the charities, who made sure the money went where it was needed. Anna was my advisor, my confidant, my partner in every way that mattered. She had been promoted from maid to foundation director, and she had a talent for administration that I had never suspected. She had also become something more to me, something I hadn't expected and couldn't name. She was the steady presence in my life, the voice of reason that kept me grounded when the ghosts of my past threatened to overwhelm me. Lily had become the heart of the foundation. She was 6 now, a bright, curious child who had lost some of her otherworldly intensity as she grew older. But the gift was still there, the strange ability to see what others couldn't, to know what others didn't. We had learned to trust her instincts, to follow her guidance when she said something felt wrong or right. The staff called her the little angel, and in many ways, she was. At the dedication ceremony, the grand ballroom of the foundation's headquarters was filled with donors, politicians, and community leaders. It was a far cry from the glittering parties I had once hosted, but it felt more real, more meaningful. The faces were different. Social workers instead of crime lords, philanthropists instead of investors, but the energy was the same. These were people who believed in something, people who wanted to make a difference. I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. Anna and Lily sat in the front row, Luca beside them. Victor was gone. He had died in prison 2 months earlier, his last words a whispered apology to me. I had visited him the day before he passed, and I had told him I forgave him. It was the truth. It was the only way I could move forward. 5 years ago, I began, my voice steady. I was a different man. I built an empire on fear, and violence. I believed that power was the only thing that mattered, that control was the only way to survive. I was wrong. The room was silent, every eye fixed on me. I learned that the hard way. I lost my empire, my friends, the people I trusted most. But I also gained something I had never expected. I gained a family. I looked at Anna, at Lily, at Luca. They were my reasons for standing here, my reasons for trying to build something better. This foundation is my way of making amends, I continued. It's my way of honoring the people who saved me, who showed me that love is stronger than fear, that kindness is more powerful than violence. Every dollar we raise, every child we help, is a step toward our future I never thought I could have. The applause was thunderous. Lily clapped the loudest, her small hands making a sound that was FAR bigger than she was. Anna was crying, TRS streaming down her face, but she was smiling too. After the ceremony, I found myself in the GA den behind the building, looking at the newly planted roses. Lily was there, running through the paths, her laughter echoing off the walls. She had grown so much in the last 6 months, so full of life and energy. Mr. Vincent, she called out, running Tawa Ardimi. Come see the flowers. They're beautiful. I knelt beside her, looking at the roses she was pointing to. They were red, the same shade as the blood I had spilled over the ORS. But now they were something else. They were symbols of growth, of renewal, of the beauty that could emerge from even the darkest soil. Thank you, I said softly. For everything, Lily. For saving my life. She hugged me tightly, her arms around my neck. You saved us too, Mr. Vincent. You gave us a home. You gave us a family. I held her, feeling the TRS prick at my eyes. This child, this extraordinary child, had changed everything. She had seen through the masks and the lies, had spoken the truth when no one else would. She had given me a second chance, and I had taken it. As I stood there, holding Lily, watching the sun set over the GA den, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades.
Peace. Contentment.
The knowledge that I had finally done something right. The Caruso Foundation was my legacy now. Not the blood and violence of my past, but the hope and healing of my future. And it was all because of a little girl's whisper. The GA den was quiet now, the last of the guests gone, the lights in the foundation's windows slowly flickering off one by one. Lily had fallen asleep in my arms, her small body warm and trusting against my chest. Her mother had gone inside to make tea, leaving us alone in the soft glow of the GA den lamps. I looked down at the child who had changed everything. She had been so small that night at the estate, so fragile and afraid, yet she had found the courage to warn a stranger of the danger that surrounded them. She had seen the bombs, the whispers of the bad men, and she had spoken up even though it terrified her. That kind of courage was rare in adults, but in a child it was nothing short of miraculous. The gift was still there, though it had quieted as she grew. She still saw things sometimes, knew things she shouldn't, but the urgency had faded. The angels, as she called them, had given her a mission, and she had completed it. Now she could just be a child, running through GA dens and laughing at the sky. I thought about everything that had led me here. The betrayal of Marco, the lies of Celeste, the twisted love of Victor, the bombing that had killed 12 people and wounded 37. The years of building an empire on fear and violence, only to see it crumble in a single night. I thought about Luca, trapped in that box, singing our mother's song to keep from going mad. I thought about Anna, who had risked everything to help me, who had seen the good in me when I couldn't see it myself. And I thought about myself, the man I had been, the man I was now, the man I wanted to become, that I had spent my entire life fighting, clawing, killing to get to the top. I had believed that power was the only currency that mattered, that control was the only path to safety. But I had been wrong. The real power was in connection, in love, in the bonds that we forge with the people who matter most. The real safety was in having people who would stand by you, no matter what. Lily stirred in my arms, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at me with those ancient, knowing eyes, and she smiled. I knew you would be okay, Mr. Vincent, she said softly. The angels told me. I kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it still surprised me. I love you, Lily. You're my hero. She hugged me tightly. I love you too, Mr. Vincent. You're my hero too. Anna emerged from the building, 2 cups of tea in her hands. She smiled at us, a warm, genuine smile that made my heart ache with a feeling I had never allowed myself to name. Ready to go home, she asked. I looked at her, at this woman who had become my partner in everything. I looked at Lily, this child who had saved my life and given me a future. And I looked at the GA den, at the roses blooming in the moonlight, at the foundation that would CA, RRY my legacy 4-way RD. Yes, I said. let's go home. We walked out of the GA den together, a family forged in fire and betrayal. The past was behind us, the future uncertain, but we had each other, and that was enough.